What if growing your church from 50 people to 200 people was about focusing on the right things at the right time? I've helped churches of all sizes experience significant growth by breaking those steps into 4 90-day sprints. And these sprints aren't about better preaching or better music or cooler environments. They're about systems that if you implement them right, they will make an actual difference in the number of people you see on Sunday. Let me show you exactly how I would grow my church from 50 to 200 if I was starting all over. Let's do this. Well, hey guys, I'm Thomas here from Reach Right. We put out new content like this every single week. So if this is the kind of thing that helps your church, it would mean a lot to me if you would hit that subscribe button below. Now, let me get this out of the way before I go any further. Jesus is the one that will build his church. We get to partner with him, and what I'm going to share with you is not a replacement for the Holy Spirit and Jesus himself building his church. What I'm going to unpack with you today are systems that I have found at my church and at churches that I've helped that actually help them move the needle and see their church grow to that next level. Now, I've broken it down into 90-day sprints, or think of it as one per quarter, that if you implement these specifically in this order, it's actually going to help your church grow. The first sprint is the one I like to call the visitor acceleration sprint. I think so many pastors misjudge how many first-time visitors it'll take for a church to grow from 50 to 200 people. To quadruple in size, it is a monumental task, and it takes a lot of first-time visitors. If you're a church of 50 people and you want to grow to 200 people, that means you'll need 150 new people in your church. But don't make the mistake of thinking that 100% of your first-time visitors wind up getting plugged into your church. In fact, the average church only is able to connect with about 10% of the people that visit their church for the first time. And even the very best churches, if you're assimilating 20% of the people that visit your church, that is a huge win. So what does that mean? If you need to grow by 150 people, and let's even assume the best case scenario, you'll need somewhere in the neighborhood of 750 to 1,000 first-time guests over the course of the next year. And that's not a small number. That's 15 to 20 first-time visitors every single week. Now, that might not sound like a lot if you're a church of 1,000 people, but if you're a church of 50 people, well, 15 to 20 people every single week, that's a lot of visitors. And I know this because I used to pastor a church of around 30 people that saw maybe one visitor every month. We actually grew that to seeing 15 to 20 visitors every single week. The first thing we did at our church is we got really serious about our digital front door. It started out with our church website. We knew that almost everybody that was going to walk through our doors was going to see us online before they came in person. Just think about it. If you were to go to a restaurant or hire a plumber, if you're anything like me, I get onto their website and I look at maybe their reviews before I ever show up. Well, people do the same thing when it comes to churches. So you need to realize that your website is literally the front door to your church now. People will make decisions in a matter of seconds whether they can see themselves fitting in there or if they're going to try some other place. You absolutely need to invest in building a website that makes a great first impression. You do this by having engaging video and photography all throughout the website, making sure your overall brand for your church matches. But just building a website, unfortunately, isn't enough because you have to find ways to get people onto that website and engaging with your church. And I want to recommend 2 specific ways that you do that. The first one, and probably the most important one, if I'm being honest, is focusing on local search engine optimization. This is making sure that your church shows up when people put super simple searches into Google like churches near me or churches in Los Angeles. People are typing in these kinds of searches all the time, every day. And what's so cool is that even small churches can rank right alongside the largest churches in your community if you know how to do this right. It probably starts with you figuring out where your church stands right now. So if you don't know where you show up in those searches, we have a tool that I'm going to link to down in the description that'll give you an exact grade of where you stand on a Google search right in your church's backyard, a mile away, and further out. So you'll want to take advantage of that. It costs you nothing. You answer a few questions and it'll do the search research and tell you exactly where your church is ranking and where you need to make improvements. And then I strongly recommend that every church takes advantage of the Google Ad Grant. Now, if you don't know, Google gives churches $10,000 every month in free ads that you can use on their ad platform. That means you can target people looking for churches in your area, but even better, you can target people looking for just about any kind of felt need that your church can possibly help with. Just about every church is eligible for this Google Ad Grant, but there are a few things you want to make sure of before you dive in. So to that end, we built an eligibility checker. I'm going to leave a link to that in the description as well. Now, after you have your digital footprint really dialed in, things like your website and your search engine optimization, then it's time to move on to really focusing on equipping your church members to be the inviters of your church. So many church leaders make this mistake where they set themselves up as the ministers and let the people in the church be the financiers of the ministry. That was never the way the gospel was intended to work. In fact, in my view, churches that are healthiest are set up where the pastors are the administrators and the people of the church are the actual ministers. Well, as a pastor, there's so many people in my community that I have no connection with, but you know who does? The people in my church. They have coworkers and family members and other parents on sports teams and students and people that are involved in their lives. And the best person to connect with them and invite them to church is not me as the pastor, it's the people of our church. What does that look like? Well, it probably means making physical invite cards that people from our church can hand to coworkers or people that they encounter or neighbors and invite them to our services on Sundays and especially some of our bigger weekends or big events. It also looks like making very shareable social media posts that our church has created and share it on their timeline and let their friends know about it. Build a passion for that and your church will always have a steady flow of visitors. After you've taken the time to get that ball rolling, you'll need to step up the next sprint, which is the visitor follow-up system. Remember how I said in the beginning that the average church is able to assimilate about 10% of the people that visit, but the most effective churches are seeing about 20% of their visitors become fully committed members? Well, the difference between that 10 and 20%, a lot of that lies in your visitor follow-up process. The first step I recommend is really dialing in your post-visit communication system. We recommend that you actually send a text on the day of their visit. This is a text that usually is best that it feels like it comes from the lead pastor that just thanks someone so much for visiting for that first. After that, we recommend a sequence of emails and phone calls and maybe even a handwritten card that in our experience helps take things to the next level and makes visitors feel really warmly welcome. We actually encourage you to find a way to pull that follow-up process to be a little bit sooner in the relationship they have with your church. And in fact, one of the things that we see that works very well is setting up a plan your visit section on your website. What this is a page on your site that makes some promises to someone that's considering visiting your church. You invite them to fill out a simple form to let you know that they're coming. And for that, you promise them to show them around and make sure they find a seat in the middle so they're not going to stick out like a sore thumb. It's really scary for people to come to churches for the first time, so we have to remember that and make sure we're making our guests feel as comfortable as possible. But what this does, in addition to helping them feel comfortable, is it actually allows you to get their information ahead of time and start the conversation with your visitors before they ever show up on a Sunday. Now, is everybody going to fill out a plan your visit form before they show up? Obviously not. You don't require that for someone to come to your church, but we found that those that do are some of our stickiest visitors that we ever have as a church. Take those 90 days to really build out this visitor follow-up process, and that huge influx of visitors is going to start to become more and more connected, and you'll be well on your way, which will lead you to the third sprint, which is building out your attender to member process. Now, for starters, I recommend that you do a monthly new members meeting. Now, I hear what you're probably thinking. Monthly, Thomas, that is so often where there's no way that's going to work. Well, remember, if we're seeing 15 to 20 visitors every single week and we're trying to connect 20% of those people, well, that means somewhere around 20 new people are probably going to be good candidates and will say yes to a new members meeting every single month. The two goals are to help them get connected with other people and to get connected in a place of service. Let's face it, the reality here is that people stay connected at churches where their friends are. So if we can do anything to help people build relationships within our church, their odds of sticking around and being a part of our church family absolutely go through the roof. And what better way to build friendships than things like life groups or home groups and taking steps and acts of service. A lot of times pastors get nervous about asking people to serve too early in their relationship with the church, but I really find more and more, especially in these younger generations, that finding places to give back are one of the best ways to help them get connected. And let's face it, we're not asking them to get connected and start writing sermons and preaching on Sunday. We're not even asking them necessarily to lead small groups yet. Maybe there's opportunities in setup and tear down around your church, or ushering people to seats, or working in a parking lot. I don't know how your church is set up, but I find that a lot of churches will have something that someone very early in the process can get involved with. In fact, one of the best ways I've found for newer people to get connected is by getting involved with outward-facing ministry opportunities. At my church, we did a ministry called Laundry Love, where we took over laundromats in our community and provided free clothes washing for people that couldn't have otherwise afforded it. And you know who loved Laundry Love? It was people that were newer to our church. They got a chance to immediately start giving back and feel like they were making an impact. So I found that outward-facing ministries are often some of the best opportunities to help people make that next connection. So you're doing those new member classes, you're inviting people into small groups and into acts of service. Well, what comes next? Well, the fourth quarter sprint that we recommend every church really take seriously is a small group system. One of the big changes that happens for a church that goes from 50 people to 200 people is the way that discipleship has to take place. As a pastor of a church of about 50 people, I can probably do an adequate job at best of pastoring about 50 different people. I can be their primary source of care, but you know what I can't do is I can't effectively pastor a group of 200 people, at least not by myself. What I need is an army of other people that want to pastor their community. If you have 20 new people saying they want to be a part of your church every single month, you need to have a system to disciple these 20 people, and I think small groups are the most effective way to do that. That means best case scenario, you're going to be launching 2 new groups every single month. And that is a huge undertaking. And what is the biggest bottleneck to launching 2 new groups? Well, you probably know this already, but it's having qualified leaders that are ready to start small groups. Well, maybe you're asking, how do we do these small groups and how do we do them most effectively? Well, for most churches, I find that sermon-based small groups tend to be the most effective way. One of the really cool things is with AI tools now, creating sermon-based small group discussion guides is really a breeze. What we do at our church is we just load a transcript of our message that we just pull directly from YouTube. We put that right into ChatGPT and we ask it to create a discussion guide that includes an icebreaker, a scripture reading, and some really powerful questions that'll help get conversation going about the topic discussed in the sermon. ChatGPT usually does a pretty good job of it, but sometimes we have to tweak things a little bit. But we use the system to really multiply our effectiveness and our ability to launch groups quickly. So we've covered so far how you get visitors, how to turn them into attenders, how to turn those attenders into members, and how to disciple those members into people that are reproducing Christ-following disciples. Now, one thing I have to make clear is that to make something like this work, these 4 90-day sprints, you need to have total leadership alignment. The people that God has given you in your church, your co-pastors or associate pastors, or even if it's just yourself, your lay leaders within your church, you need to cast the vision for this to them first. It's not going to be a small undertaking, and rest assured, growing from 50 to 200 people in 1 year is not easy. It'll take a lot of hard work, but if your team is bought in, I believe that your church can do it. Why do I believe that? Because I've seen that in my church, and I've seen multiple other churches implement this system and see similar kinds of growth. But maybe you're stuck on the first sprint and you're wondering, I don't know how on earth we're going to get 15 to 20 visitors in our door every week. Well, I made an entire video about Church Marketing 101. It's the exact recipe that I would follow, and I think, in fact, most churches should follow if they want to see more visitors walk through their door. You need to watch this video next.